Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the webinar for DOE's funding opportunity announcement entitled First Steps Towards Developing Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency on Tribal Lands, 2016, FOA number DE FOA 0001621. I'm Randy Mannion of Western Area Power Administration. I will be assisting with today's webinar, and let's go over some event details first. Today's webinar is being recorded, and all phones have been muted for this purpose. The audio recording and PowerPoints will be available in about 1 to 2 weeks. You will be notified once those are posted on the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs website. Be aware that questions will not be entertained during this webinar, as this is a competitive opportunity and all questions need to be submitted in writing. And so please submit your questions via email directly to tribal, T-R-I-B-A-L, at ee.doe.gov. That again is tribal, T-R-I-B-A-L, at ee.doe.gov. And we'll try to keep the webinar to no more than 2 hours. We have one speaker today, Lizana Pierce, who will be briefing you on the funding opportunity announcement. And Ms. Pierce is with the U.S. Department of Energy and a program manager for the DOE's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs. And we are now officially starting the webinar, and Lizana, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy, and good afternoon and welcome to the webinar, everyone. This informational webinar is for people interested in applying for Department of Energy's funding opportunity announcement entitled First Steps Towards Developing Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency on Tribal Lands, which was issued August 16, 2016. As Randy said, my name is Lizana Pierce, and I'm an engineer with the Department of Energy and a program manager under the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs, otherwise known as the Office of Indian Energy, simply. I've been working in clean energy for the last 20 years, and specifically in Indian energy since the late 90s. And under the Office of Indian Energy, I'm tasked with implementing the deployment program, specifically for financial assistance. That entails issuing funding opportunity announcements, managing the application review process, and administering the resultant grants, and overseeing the funded tribal energy projects. Pardon me. The intent of this webinar is to cover the basic aspects of the funding opportunity announcement, otherwise known as a FOA, and highlight essential details about the application process, including the type of application sought, who is eligible to apply, cost share and other requirements, what the application needs to contain, and how to ask for related questions, and how applications will be evaluated and selected for funding. Before we begin, I'd like to draw your attention to the email address in the lower right-hand side of this cover page. That's the official mailbox to direct all of your questions to during the entire FOA process. Please do not contact DOE or DOE laboratory staff directly with questions, including myself, as all these questions must be in writing. And the reason for that is only accepting questions in writing is to ensure that you receive a formal response, and so that everyone has the benefit of that same response. Basically, because if you have a question, there's probably other potential applicants likely to have the same question. So as we will not have live Q&A session as part of this webinar, please capture your questions as they come up and send them via email to tribal@ee.doe.gov. And in the subject line of your email, please include the FOA number, DE-FOA-0001621. And unless a similar question has already been asked, responses to questions received in this mailbox will be posted to the Frequently Asked Questions webpage for this FOA, and that's on the EERE Exchange website. Responses to your questions will typically be posted within 3 business days after receipt. But before submitting a question, please check the FAQs webpage to see if a similar question has already been answered. In submitting your question, please also be careful not to include any language that might be business sensitive, proprietary, or confidential. Your participation in this webinar is completely voluntary, and there are no particular advantages or disadvantages to the application evaluation process with respect to your participation in the webinar today. These slides and the audio recording of the webinar will be posted in the next week or so, as Randy said, and as a registrant of the webinar, you'll be notified when this material is available. You may want to download the FOA document now for reference, as I will be referencing specific pages during the webinar. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Pardon me. Before we discuss the funding opportunity announcement itself, I wanted to walk you through the ER Exchange site, find the FOA document itself, the application forms, and frequently asked questions, FAQs. The ERE Exchange website is at eere-exchange.energy.gov, and once on that page, you need to scroll down the left until you can locate the FOA number, which, as we said before, was DE-FOA-0001621. Clicking the FOA number in the FOA list will take you to the section of the web page specific to this FOA, as shown on the slide. As you can see in the slide of the ERE Exchange website, this section specific to the FOA includes a brief summary and other key information. The direct link to this FOA summary is at the bottom of the slide, and my apologies for the legibility of the slide, but the screenshot will be expanded in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. As you can see from this screenshot, the ERE Exchange summary for this FOA includes the FOA document itself, required application documents, contact information for submitting questions regarding the FOA, and for ERE Exchange support, and a link to the frequently asked questions, FAQs webpage, and the submission deadline of October 20th, 2016 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If the application documents are not shown, you'll need to click on the View Required Documents link under the Required Application Documents. Once the View Documents will be revealed, as shown on the slide, note that these are not the entirety of the forms and documents that compose a complete application. Next slide, please. As you can see, once you click on the View Required Application Documents, you'll see the various forms that need to be included. Note that these only comprise a part of the application and in and of themselves do not make a complete application. Further into the presentation, we'll go through the elements that comprise a complete application. So the forms include the application for federal assistance, the standard form 424. This is a fillable PDF form. There's the budget justification form, IE 335, which is a multi-tab Microsoft Excel form. There's also disclosure of lobbying activities, SFLL. It's a Word document, and if this does not apply to you, please indicate not applicable, sign, date, and include as part of your application. There's also a summary slide template, which is a PowerPoint slide, and this is intended to summarize your proposed project. And there's a work plan template, which is a Microsoft Word document to be used in preparing your work plan for your proposed project. All the other components of a complete application are self-generated. For a complete list of the application contents, please see the tables on pages 19 and 20 of the FOA. Next slide, please. The answers to all FOA-related questions, as we said, received in our email box, tribal@ee.doe.gov, will be posted on the Frequently Asked Questions webpage. This slide shows an example of the FAQ webpage. Please check this page periodically, as questions and answers will continue to be posted throughout the entire time the FOA is open, especially before submitting questions, as a similar question may have already been answered. Next slide, please. This slide shows the anticipated schedule for the FOA, which is also on the cover page of the funding opportunity announcement, or FOA document itself. The FOA has already been posted, and we are conducting the FOA informational webinar now. Please note that all applications are due on the ERE Exchange website no later than 5 o'clock Eastern on October 20th, 2016. Note that the closing time is 5 o'clock Eastern, and that is so that the help desk assistance and support will be available to you up until the closing time. If you are in the Alaska, Pacific, Mountain, or Central time zones, please plan accordingly to meet the 5 o'clock Eastern deadline. Also note that DOE will not extend the submission deadline for applicants that fail to submit the required information due to server connection or congestion. The EERE exchange system is designed to enforce the deadline specified in this FOA. The apply and submit buttons may be disabled at that submission deadline. Therefore, please ensure you begin uploading your application at least 48 hours in advance of the submission deadline to ensure you meet that, and allow at least 1 hour to submit your application. Once your application is submitted, you may go back and revise it or update until the expiration of the deadline. So I encourage you to verify that all elements of a complete application are actually submitted before that deadline. So DOE anticipates notifying applicants selected for negotiation of award in February and in making awards in the spring and early summer. Next, please note that each and every applicant will receive a notification letter by email to the technical and administrative points of contact designated in the application of the ERE exchange system. So notification letters will state whether the application is determined to be non-compliant, which is incomplete or late, ineligible, or non-responsive. And we'll see pages 8 and 9 of the FOA for applications specifically not of interest. If your application was not selected for funding, or selection was postponed, or not selected but designated as an alternate, or selected for negotiation towards an award. So the notification letter will state the basis upon which each of those decisions were made. And note that there is no process for appeal for applications deemed non-compliant or ineligible. Those decisions are final. Next slide, please. So to apply to the FOA, the applicant must register with and submit the application materials through the EERE Exchange website. We've spoken about how to submit a question and the frequently asked questions webpage, where also questions and answers will be posted. In order to receive an automatic update of when amendments to the FOA are posted, though, you need to consider registering in grants.gov. That's the only way to get automatic updates of amendments to this FOA. But remember, applications will not be accepted through grants.gov. Next slide, please. The ERE Exchange registration does not have a delay. However, some of the remaining registration requirements could take several weeks to process and are necessary for a potential applicant to actually receive an award. So although not required in order to submit an application, all potential applicants lacking a DUNS number or those not registered in SAM or Fed Connect should complete those registrations as soon as possible. You can see Part 4 or 6B, beginning on page 41 of the FOA for information on how to register into the above systems. Next slide, please. So all applicants are strongly encouraged to carefully read the funding opportunity announcement and to adhere to the status submission requirements. This presentation summarizes the contents of the FOA. However, if there are any inconsistencies between the FOA and this presentation or statements from DOE personnel, the FOA is the controlling document, and applicants should rely solely on the FOA language or officially seek clarification from DOE by submitting a written question. If you believe there are any inconsistencies, please contact us by sending an email again to that same email address, tribal@ee.doe.gov. Next slide, please. So the agenda for this webinar is as shown. First, we'll provide a summary of the FOA. We'll discuss the application specifically not of interest, the award information, applicant eligibility, cost share, content and form of the application, application eligibility, merit review and selection criteria and process, registration requirements, application submission and points of contact, questions, and then the closing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the FOA Executive Summary is included on page 1 of the FOA document and includes key information on the FOA. This information is summarized on this and on the next slide, and we'll go over this information as part of the presentation, but is provided here as a summary. And I'll give you just a moment to read through the slide. Next slide, please. The FOA Executive Summary also includes the eligibility, the cost share information, and information on submission. And we'll go over the eligibility in detail, but realize that eligible entities are restricted to Indian tribes, including Alaska Native Villages, Alaska Native Regional Corporations, and Village Corporations, and Tribal Energy Resource Development Organizations. Also, you may submit multiple applications. However, each must be unique and distinct and address only one topic area. Next slide, please. So the goal of DOE's Office of Indian Energy is really to strengthen tribal communities to sustain future generations. Specifically, the office is charged with promoting Indian tribal energy development, efficiency use, reducing or stabilizing energy costs, enhancing and strengthening Indian tribal energy and economic infrastructure related to natural resource development and electrification, and bringing electrical power and services to Indian land and homes located on Indian land were acquired, constructed, or improved with federal funds. Next slide, please. So in support of the office's objectives under this funding opportunity announcement, the office is soliciting applications to initiate the first steps towards developing and sustaining renewable energy and energy efficiency on tribal lands. Next slide, please. Specifically, the Office of Indian Energy is soliciting applications from Indian tribes, as we said, including Alaska Native Villages, Alaska Native Regional Corporations, and Village Corporations, hereafter referred to as Indian Tribe, and the Tribal Energy Resource Development Organizations. And under the FOA, the following topic areas to conduct energy options analysis. Topic area 1, establish baseline energy use and efficiency options. Topic area 2, develop energy organizations. Topic area 3, conduct climate resiliency planning, which is topic area 4. Or establish policy regulations and codes to reduce energy use or promote energy development, which is topic area 5. And to obtain skills and training related to energy use and development, topic area 6. I would urge you to review the requirements under each of those topic areas on pages 4 through 8 of the FOA document. And as we will not go through the specific of each topic area as part of this webinar. Next slide, please. So, pursuant to the authorizing statute, the Office of Indian Energy will only accept applications from an eligible entity, which includes an Indian tribe or Tribal Energy Resource Development Organization. Applications from a consortium of Indian tribes will be accepted but must be submitted by a single Indian tribe acting as the applicant representing the consortium. Applications from any other organization or entity, regardless of whether they represent an eligible entity, will not be accepted. Next slide, please. So a tribal council resolution from each participating Indian tribe, a declaration or resolution from each Tribal Energy Resource Development Organization, and a letter of commitment from all other project participants is required as part of the application. Also note that all resolutions, declarations, and letters of commitment must be specific to this FOA and must include any cost-sharing commitment. Next slide, please. So it is expected that proposed activities will result in specific outcomes, measurable results, or end products that will lead to the development and deployment of strategic energy solutions and/or build knowledge and skills necessary to implement successful energy solutions. Also under this FOA, 10% cost share will be required. The cost share is a percentage of the total allowable cost of the project, which includes both the government share and the recipient share of the total project cost. So cost share must come from non-federal sources unless otherwise allowed by law. I would urge you to see Section 3B, starting on page 11 of the FOA document, which includes examples of federal funds that are permissible for use for cost share. Next slide, please. Selected applicants will need to plan a budget for a one-week trip each year to Golden, Colorado to attend and present at the annual program review. So please include those travel costs for a one-week trip each year of the proposed project in the budget. And for more on the annual reviews, you can see Tribal Energy Program Review under projects on the Office of Indian Energy website. And that URL is www.energy.gov/Indian Energy. Next slide, please. So applications specifically not of interest are indicated on this slide and on pages 8 and 9 of the FOA document. So if your application includes any of these types, it will be deemed non-responsive and will not be reviewed or considered for an award. Specifically, anything that falls outside the parameters specified in Section 1B of the FOA, and applications proposing the purchase of major equipment, the installation of energy hardware, installation of meters or other indicators, evaluation of product marketing opportunities, the assessment of manufacturing opportunities, technology research and development, product development, procurement of project-related services, demonstration of unproven technologies, or major construction and manufacturing facilities or any buildings. Also, applications not of interest are anywhere one has already taken irreversible actions regarding the project, and those can include, but are not limited to, site clearing, groundbreaking equipment, purchase, installation, etc. So remember, this is really a planning grant, and anything that proposes installation of hardware will not be considered. Next slide, please. So next on to the award information. As discussed in the executive summary, DOE expects to make approximately $2 to $3 million in federal funds available for new awards under this FOA. Individual award amounts are anticipated to range from $50,000 to $250,000 and to not exceed $250,000. Also, DOE will not consider applications proposing DOE funds of less than $50,000. The grant period is expected to be approximately 1 to 2 years, but no longer than 3 years. DOE may issue awards in one, multiple, or none of the topic areas. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now we'll go over who is eligible to apply. Only the following types of applicants are eligible, and if they do not meet these requirements, they will be deemed ineligible and their applications will not be reviewed or considered. As we've said, eligible entities are restricted to an Indian tribe or tribal energy resource development organization. As previously indicated, applications from a consortium of Indian tribes or tribal consortium will be accepted, but must be submitted by a single Indian tribe acting on as the applicant representing that consortium. And again, applications from any other organization or entity, regardless of whether they represent that eligible entity, will not be accepted. Next slide, please. So note here that an Indian tribe, for purposes of this FOA, is any Indian tribe, band, nation, or other organized group or community, including Alaska Native villages, Alaska Native regional corps, and village corporations, as defined in or established pursuant to ANCSA, and that are recognized as eligible for special services and programs and services provided by the United States because of their status as Indians. Specifically, for purposes of this announcement, an Indian tribe, including Alaska Native villages, but not the regional or village corporations, must be federally recognized and listed in the Indian entities recognized and eligible to receive services from the United States Bureau of Indian Affairs. Also, for purposes of this FOA, an Alaska Native Regional Corporation means one of the 13 Alaska Native Regional Corporations as defined and established pursuant to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, ANCSA. You can also find these eligibility requirements on pages 10 and 11 of the FOA. Next slide, please. As you can see here and on pages 10 and 11, the definitions of an Alaska Native Village Corporation, a tribal consortium, and a tribal energy resource development organization. And again, applications from any other organization or entity, regardless of whether they represent that eligible applicant, will not be accepted. Next slide, please. Questions regarding eligibility. DOE will not make eligibility determinations for potential applicants prior to the date in which applications to this FOA must be submitted. So the decision on whether to submit an application in response to the FOA lies solely with the applicant. Next slide, please. So next on to cost sharing. As we indicated before, under this funding opportunity announcement, required cost share must be at least 10% of the total allowable cost of the project, where the total allowable cost is the sum of the DOE share and the recipient share. For example, if the requested DOE costs are $125,000, the cost share would be $13,888, or 10% of the total proposed project cost of $138,889, not the 10% of DOE's requested amount of $125,000 or $12,500. So again, the cost share is 10% of the total project cost. So to assist applicants in calculating proper cost share amounts, we've included additional cost share information in Appendix B of the FOA. Next slide. So all cost share must come from non-federal sources unless otherwise allowed by law. Included here and in the FOA on pages 12 are a few instances where federal funds can be used as non-federal cost share. Specifically, funding under the Indian Self-Determination Act, Tribal Self-Governance Funding Agreements, Self-Determination Contract Funding, or Compact Funding. Additionally, I understand that HUD's Indian Community Development Block Grant ICDBG funds can also be used as non-federal cost share. So if the funds being proposed as non-federal cost share or from a federal source allowed by law, you must include the specifically identify those funds and provide as part of your application evidence of the authority for those to be used as non-federal cost share, such as an excerpt from the authorizing statute. Next slide, please. So the total budgeted presented in the application must include, again, both the federal DOE and the non-federal cost share, which combined reflect the total project cost proposed. All costs must be verifiable from the recipient's records and be necessary and reasonable for the accomplishment of the project. So, allowable, allocable, reasonable. That's kind of, and as all sources of cost share are considered part of the total project cost, those cost share dollars will be scrutinized under the same federal regulations as federal dollars for the project. Next slide, please. The cost share must be allowable and must be verifiable at the time of submission of the application. So please refer to this chart for your entity's applicable cost principles. So it is imperative that you follow those applicable cost principles when creating your budget for the application. Next slide, please. So cost share can be provided in cash or as in-kind contributions, and it can be provided by the recipient, the subcontractors, or third parties. So allowable in-kind contributions may include, but aren't limited to, such contributions of time, unrecovered indirect costs, unrecovered facility and administrative costs, F&A costs, the rental value of buildings or equipment, not the purchase price, but just the rental value, and the value of services or other resources or third-party in-kind contributions. Next slide, please. So be aware that there are items that are considered unallowable cost share. And if the cost is considered unallowable, it cannot be requested from DOE, nor counted as cost share. So this slide provides some examples of cost share that is unallowable. And please take note of the fourth and fifth bullets. Generally, any cost before or after the DOE grant period cannot be considered as cost share. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when if award is made, cost share must be provided on an invoice-by-invoice basis at, as a minimum, the percentage negotiated. However, if you are not able to provide the cost share on an invoice-by-invoice basis, you may request a waiver from DOE's contracting officer. The request would be made after notification of selection prior to award. So as an example of cost share on an invoice-by-invoice basis, if an award is executed and an entity is requesting reimbursement for $50,000 in DOE funds, and the cost share is 10%, then the cost share reflected on that invoice must be $5,556, or 10% of the total project costs incurred of $55,556. Next slide, please. So next on to the content and the format of the application. Applications must include the application for federal assistance, which is the standard form 424, and that's a formal application form signed by the authorized representative of the applicant. And by signing, that authorized representative is making certain certifications and assurances, and therefore the form must be printed, signed, scanned before being uploaded as part of your application. Note that all forms can be obtained from the ERE Exchange webpage under the required application documents. And by clicking the required application documents, you'll get hyperlinks to the FOA forms are revealed, and then you can download, complete, and then submit. Also included or needed as part of a complete application would be a summary for public release. So the applicants are required to submit a one-page summary of your proposed project. Also needed is a summary slide, which is a single PowerPoint slide that provides quick facts about your proposed project. The slide content requirements are provided in the FOA, and the template is provided as part of the required application documents on the ERE Exchange website. The technical volume is also a required element of your application, and this is the key submission, and it describes the proposed project and addresses all the merit review criteria. The technical volume must not exceed 10 pages, but that excludes the cover page and table of contents, as DOE is only going to review the first 10 pages. So again, see the table on pages 22 through 25 of the FOA document for specific content of the technical volume. Briefly, though, the technical volume should include a cover page. See those instructions on page 22. And the cover page is not counted against the 10-page limit, as I just indicated. And the table of contents. The cover page is, again, it's not counted. The technical volume needs to include an executive summary, a project description and outcome, and roles, responsibilities, and capabilities. The actual commitments of the application or commitments of the applicant and each participant is not included in that page limit, as those commitments are to be included as an attachment. And depending on the type of entity, those commitments need to be in the form of resolutions, declarations, and letters of commitment. Note that letters of support from anyone besides the member Indian tribe or participants of the project are not required nor desired. Another element of your application is a work plan. The work plan is not part of the technical volume, but is to be included as a separate attachment. The work plan should describe the work to be accomplished and how the applicant will achieve the project milestones. The work plan must not exceed 5 pages, as again, only the first 5 pages will be reviewed. You can see pages 25 through 27 of the FOA document for the specific content. And the work plan template is included on the ER Exchange webpage under required application documents and also as Appendix C of the FOA document itself. The complete application also includes, and we'll discuss those on the next slide. So during the submittal of your application in the ER Exchange, files are denoted as either required or optional. So be aware that the files designated as optional on this slide and in the ER Exchange may actually be necessary to complete your application and to fully address the merit review criteria. So the attachments to your applications may include a graphics file, which is an optional file, but under this file you can supply graphics or other information to supplement your technical volume, including maps, photographs, past studies, reports, or any other supplemental information or other visuals. Also included as an attachment to your application is the statement of commitments and cost sharing file. And this is a required file and includes the actual commitments from the applicant and each participant. As indicated from the last slide, those commitments may be in the form of resolutions, declarations, and letters of commitment. And again, letters of support by anyone not participating in the proposed project are not required nor desired and should not be provided as part of the application. Another attachment is the subcontract plan, and this is required if the project participants, this be consultants, contractors, or vendors, have not been identified or will be competed for work. The plan should include a description of the selection process to be employed, statement of work, and criteria to be used for selection. Subcontract plan may be supplemented by excerpts from your procurement policy or procedures document. Also, as an attachment, you need to include a resume file, and this is required for each key person proposed. That includes the applicant's technical contact, the applicant's business contact, tribal staff, consultants, subcontractor representatives, etc. And key person is any individual who contributes in a substantive, measurable way to the execution of the project. So each resume must not exceed 2 pages. You need to save all the resumes in a single file for uploading with your application. Also needed as an attachment is budget justification workbook. This is Form IE 335. So the budget justification workbook is required and must include both the funds being requested from DOE as well as those being proposed as cost share. So let me repeat, budget and budget justification must reflect all project costs, regardless of whether those funds are being requested from DOE or if they're provided as cost share. The form itself is a multi-tab Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and in addition to the proposed cost, the form requests the basis of estimate for the cost being proposed, whether it be an invoice or an engineering estimate or a published price or a quote, etc. That's the basis of estimate. The form can be downloaded from the ER Exchange website. Applicants must also provide a separate budget justification, which is Form IE 335, from each subawardee, which is a subrecipient or subcontractor, excluding vendors, that are expected to perform work estimated to be more than $250,000 or 25% of the total work effort, whichever is less. Remember that the budget justification must address the total project costs, both the funds being requested from DOE as well as those being proposed as cost share. So another attachment would be the budget support file, and this is optional. This file, if submitted, could include documentation such as an indirect rate agreement, breakdown of fringe costs, vendor quotes which exceed $250,000 or 25%, whichever is less, or other relevant supplemental budget-related information. The eighth attachment is the disclosure of lobbying activities. This is Standard Form LLL. This is for recipients and subrecipients who may not use any federal funds to influence or attempt to influence directly or indirectly congressional action on any legislative or appropriation matters. So all applications are required to complete and submit the SFLL, disclosure of lobbying activities, and disclose if any non-federal funds have been paid or will be paid to any person for influencing or attempting to influence any of the following in connection with your application: an officer or employee of any federal agency, a member of Congress, an officer or employee of Congress, or an employee and member of Congress. If no non-federal funds have been paid or will be paid to any person, you just need to indicate none on the form, sign it, and submit it. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this slide summarizes the elements of an application and is included on pages 19 and 20 of the FOA document. I'd recommend that you choose, if you choose to apply to this funding opportunity, to use this table as a checklist when preparing and when uploading your application. Next slide, please. As we previously pointed out, applicants must submit applications no later than 5 o'clock Eastern Time on October 20th. Once submitted, DOE will conduct an eligibility review, and an application will be deemed eligible if the applicant is an eligible entity, and refer to Section 3A of the FOA, which is on pages 10 and 11. Another eligibility requirement is the cost share, Section 3B, on pages 11 and 12 of the FOA document. The required cost share must be, as we've said, at least 10% of the total allowable cost of the project. Remember, the sum of both the DOE share and the recipient share of allowable costs equal the total allowable cost of the project. So the application is deemed eligible if it complies with the content and forms requirements, which we've just gone over, and the applicant successfully uploaded all required documents and clicked the submit button in the ARE exchange by the deadline. In other words, a complete application submitted by the deadline. And the application is eligible if the proposed project is responsive to the intent of the FOA. So see sections 1 and 3D of the FOA. Specifically, any applications not responsive to the intent of the FOA, as described in those sections, or identified as specifically not of interest, as described in Section 1C, will be deemed non-responsive and not reviewed or considered. And the applicant is eligible if it meets the eligibility requirements listed in Section 3 of the FOA, which are eligible applicants. So please be aware that DOE will not make eligibility determinations prior to the date on which applications are due. And again, the decision on whether to submit an application in response to this FOA lies solely with the applicant. In other words, DOE will not advise you or make a determination on whether your entity or your proposed project are eligible. So please do not seek advice from any DOE employee or DOE laboratory staff. Next slide, please. So now on to the merit review and selection process. This project process consists of a series of reviews, including an initial eligibility review, a rigorous technical review, and programmatic review. The rigorous technical reviews are conducted by reviewers that are experts in the subject matter of the SOA, but ultimately the selection official would consider those recommendations, and along with other considerations, such as what we call program policy factors, will make a selection decision. And we'll see a depiction of the process on the next slide. So this slide reflects the multi-tiered review process. As we indicated, it starts with a eligibility review. There's also an independent or individual review, where each of the reviewers reviews the applications by themselves without any consultation from any other reviewers. Then we will have an independent reviewer meeting. All of those folks will come together and discuss the applications, followed by a federal consensus board meeting, when they will be the ones to actually determine the consensus scores and strengths and weaknesses. And then we have a federal consensus executive board who will consider the amount of funding available and program policy factors, and they'll ultimately make recommendations to the selection official, who really is the decision maker. Next slide, please. Thank you. So next we'll go over the merit review criteria, what your application will be reviewed against. So the 4 criteria are goals and objectives, project description and outcomes, roles, responsibilities, capabilities, and commitments, and the work plan. So each of the criterion have varying weights ranging from 20% to 30%, where the weight really indicates the relative importance of that criterion. So please see pages 36 and 37 of the technical review criteria if you are following along in the FOA document. Also note that the technical volume and the work plan as described in tables 22, pages 22 through 27, pardon me, follow the same order and describe the required content on which this criteria will be applied. And I'll give you a minute to read through the slides. And I also might note that all applications under any and all of the 6 topic areas will be evaluated against that same criteria. Next slide, please. Criterion 2, or the project description and outcomes, is weighted as 30% and includes the clarity and completeness of the detailed project description and then the value of the specific expected outcomes. Remember, measurable results or end products. Next slide. So the third criterion is roles, responsibilities, capabilities, and commitments, and is weighted as 30%. It includes the soundness of the project management approach and the demonstrated level of commitment of the applicant and each participating organization. And that will be evidenced by past energy-related efforts and commitments, as evidenced by letters of commitment. Next slide, please. The fourth and final criterion is the work plan, and this is weighted at 20%. So work plans will be reviewed on the clarity and completeness of the narrative description for each activity and the likelihood of achieving those project objectives through logical task structure. Next slide, please. So next on to the selection factors. So the selection official, as we indicated, may consider the merit review recommendation, the technical scoring, if you will, the program policy factors, the amount of funds available, in arriving at his or her selections for this FOA. Next slide, please. So after the merit review process, the selection official, again, as I said, may consider the program policy factors shown here to come to a final decision. The program policy factors are also included on pages 37 and 38 of the FOA document. And I'll give you a moment to read through those factors. So you may also want to refer to the FOA for additional information on the 2 tribal climate action champions, and that those Indian tribes designated under the Promise Zone Initiative, which the selection official could consider if he or she chose to in making the final selections for funding. Next slide, please. So registration requirements. Again, to apply for this FOA, applicants must be registered and submit the application material through ERE Exchange, and you can see the URL there. During registration, you will receive a control number, and you need to make sure you retain this number, and all of your application documents must be designated with this control number. So the ERE Exchange registration does not have a delay. However, the remaining registration requirements in the table could take up to several weeks to process, and they're necessary for anyone to receive an award under this FOA. Therefore, although not required to submit an application, all applicants lacking a DUNS number or not yet registered as SAMs or Fed Connect are urged to complete those registrations as soon as possible. So a DUNS number. This is a Duns and Bradstreet Data Universal Numbering System DUNS number, and you would obtain that through the website links shown. SAMS, which is the System for Award Management. You need to register in SAM and designate an electronic business point of contact, or eBiz POC, and obtain a special password called an MPIN, which are important steps in the SAMS registrations. Basically, the SAMS system will have banking information, so if you are made an award, we'll be able to electronically transfer funds into your bank accounts. And the SAMS registration must be updated annually. So Fed Connect. When registering in Fed Connect, you would create an organizational account. Your organization's SAM MPIN number, which you just got when you registered in SAMS, it's required as a registration in Fed Connect. For more information about the SAM MPIN or other registration requirements, please review the Fed Connect Ready, Set, Go guide. It's actually pretty good, and it can be obtained from the Fed Connect site. There's screenshots, and it walks you through the process. It's actually pretty decent. Note that all the documents associated with any award will only be available through the Fed Connect system. So therefore, it's a requirement that you be registered to receive an award. Now, as we said, grants.gov, please register in grants.gov. It's the only way to receive automatic updates when amendments or changes to the FOA are posted. Again, note that applications will not be accepted through grants.gov, but only through ERE Exchange. You can find more information on these registration requirements on pages 41 and 42 of the FOA. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as we said, all required submissions must come through ERE Exchange website. DOE will not review or consider applications submitted through any other means. Please also see the user's guide for applying to the Department of Energy funding opportunity announcement found on that ERE Exchange website under manuals, and it's a step-by-step guide including screenshots on how to register, how to submit an application. Please note that for this FOA, there are no pre-application documents such as like a concept paper or letters of intent. And we will also not, you'll not be able to reply to reviewer comments. And these are exceptions to the guide. But comments, consensus comments will be provided when you're notified of the status of your application. So please disregard those particular sections in the ERA Exchange user guide. Next slide, please. Key submission points. Again, these are recommended that you check entries in ERA Exchange. You're strongly encouraged to submit the application 1 to 2 days prior to the deadline and allow full upload of application document to avoid any technical glitches. And make sure you push the submit button. If you're making changes after you push the submit button, it will unsubmit your application, and you will need to push the submit button again for it to be actually submitted. So for your records, I would also urge you to print out the ERA Exchange confirmation page at each step of the process, which contains the application's control number as well. So applicants that experience issues with submission prior to the deadline should contact the Exchange Help Desk for assistance. And that's at ERE-Exchange support at hq.doe.gov. And the Exchange Help Desk and/or the ERE Exchange system administrators can assist you in resolving any issues. The Office of Indian Energy is not able to assist with technical system issues associated with the ERE Exchange system or submittal of an application. So contact them directly, please. The applicants that experience issues with submissions that result in a late submission should also contact the ERE Exchange Help Desk for assistance. The Exchange Help Desk and/or the ERE Exchange system administrators may be able to assist. It is strongly encouraged that you keep records or documentation, including screenshots of any issues you experience in submitting your application. So when registering in ERE Exchange, applicants must designate a primary and backup points of contact. And this is whom DOE will communicate during the process. Remember that these are contacts that would be used to notify applicants of whether their applications are deemed non-responsive, non-compliant, unsuccessful, or selected for negotiation of award. But it is imperative that applicants and the selectees be responsive during the award negotiation process so we can meet negotiation deadlines. Next slide. So questions to this FOA, as we've said a number of times. If you have any questions after you've read the frequently asked questions on ERE Exchange, to please email those to tribal@ee.doe.gov. And all Q&As related to the FOA will be posted on the ERE Exchange website under frequently asked questions. We'll attempt to answer those questions within 3 business days. Unless there's a similar Q&A has already been posted. You'll also be notified via email when a response to your question has been posted. So problems with ERE Exchange or uploading and submitting an application. As I said, contact that URL. They're on the slide, and include the FOA name and number in the subject line. As questions are not being entertained during this webinar, again, please send any of those to tribal@ee.doe.gov and include the FOA name and number in the subject line as well. A few final comments. Please download the funding opportunity announcement. I urge you to read it thoroughly so you understand all the steps and requirements for submitting an application. Do not rely solely on this webinar. If you're considering submitting an application, please, register in ERE Exchange as soon as possible. Obtain a control number because that needs to be on all of your documents. Check the frequently asked questions for additional supplementary information. And a few final comments. Remember, registering in grants.gov means you'll receive email notices of any amendments or changes to the FOA, but applications will not be accepted through grants.gov. I want to thank you for attending, for your attention. And before I close, I'd also like to invite you to join the Office of Indian Energy's email list. To join, see the lower right-hand corner of our website at www.energy.gov/Indian Energy. And by subscribing, you'll receive information on this funding opportunity, funding opportunities through other agencies, training opportunities, webinars, and other upcoming events. For information on previously funded tribal energy projects, you can see projects on our website. For a list of other open funding opportunities, you can see the funding page. The Office of Indian Energy also offers technical assistance, and if that is of interest, I would urge you to check out the technical assistance section on our website and submit a request. These slides and audio recording will be posted in the next week or two, as we've said, and as a registrant of the webinar, you'll be notified when this material is available. If there are any inconsistencies, again, between the funding opportunity announcement and this presentation or statements from DOE personnel, the FOA document is the controlling document, and applicants should rely on that FOA language or seek clarification, again, by sending us a question. Hopefully, we've answered some of your questions and provided an overview of the FOA and the process. We look forward to seeing your project ideas and as part of your applications and possibly working with you in the future. And I want to, each of you have a wonderful afternoon. And Randy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lizana. And with that, we are concluding the webinar. Thanks, everyone.